In the past, the year is 2013 in Tokyo where, among the bustling streets, a salaryman reflects on his life. Acknowledging his deficiencies as a human, he accepts that he has a twisted personality and a complex imagination to complement it. Despite all of those things, he considers himself superior to the incompetent people. He continues his musings about how he has made himself a valuable person while firing an employee. The employee, mentioning his daughter's tuition fee and the loan payments for his house, begs the man to reconsider as being fired would put him under immense financial pressure. Unbothered, the man continued saying L plus ratio and laid down the facts. The employee had skipped work multiple times without a valid reason, and despite the company's orders, his performance was below satisfactory. With that line of thought, the man makes it clear that the company has no reason to keep the employee, and asks him to leave. Later, the man walks through the city, still occupied by his thoughts. In his mind, he thought, as long as he follows the rules, he'll be successful and soon will achieve a high-ranking position in the company. At the subway, while waiting for the train, things take a grim turn when the ex-employee whom the man fired pushes him on the track in front of the incoming train. While falling towards imminent death, the man thinks about how his plans were ruined due to the ex-employee who decided to follow an emotional impulse over reason. He also realizes that he forgot to clear his browser history. Suddenly, time comes to an abrupt stop and a bizarre phenomenon unfolds. One after another, the creatures, frozen in time, begin talking about how humans have lost their sense of morality and respect for God. The man deduces that in the moments preceding his death, God is appearing around him through the people and is probably about to scold him for watching furry hentai. He tells the God that he rejects his existence, leaving the God baffled. He explains that if God existed, he wouldn't have let him fall to his death unjustly. When the God asks the man if he is calling him a devil for letting him die unjustly, the man disagrees, and settles on calling him a being X. The God is a bit annoyed at his casualness with a supreme being but decides to reveal that he controls the cycle of reincarnation and causes people to be reborn. Appalled by the man's lack of faith, the God tells him that he will not reincarnate him because reincarnating people without faith is a waste of time, and it is already exhausting for the God to deal with 7 billion people in the world. Trying to defend himself, the man explains that in a world with advanced science, where one's needs are met, there will be no faith since there is no need to cling to a God as everything is provided for them. Hearing this, it gives the God an idea and he decides to reincarnate the man in a time where there is no scientific advancement and places him in dire straits so that he may learn the value of faith. And he warns him that there will be no second reincarnation if he dies again. With that, he wakes up in another world in the year 1913, as a child named Tanya being cared for by a nun. Tanya grows up in a poor orphanage in a very similar country to a European nation in her previous world, with a wide disparity between the rich and the poor, and because of that Tanya led a very rough life in the orphanage. Tanya thought to herself that living in a country that was gripped with madness that precedes war, she thought that it would be impossible for a poor, powerless girl to survive. But luckily in this world the concept of magic existed. One day, Tanya in her physical exam, Tanya showed an incredible aptitude for magic and was bound to be conscripted into the army. When the flames of war engulfed the nation, Tanya decided to voluntarily join the army as a career choice rather than wait to be conscripted. Since being X told her that she wouldn't be reincarnated again, she devoted herself to surviving and rising through the ranks, aiming to secure victory for her nation to spite and take revenge on being X. Her excellent performance gets her entrusted with training new students in just a year. Although the soldiers make fun of her age and size at first, they soon realize how ruthless she is. At one point, she ends up almost killing a soldier in an attempt to discipline him, but luckily Lieutenant Colonel Rurugin stepped in just in time. Before she can graduate, at the age of 9, she is deployed to the northern mountains as a final part of her training. During her training, the Entente Alliance attacks and mobilizes its army across the border. There, Tanya is promoted to second lieutenant and made an observer mage, and her job is to relay enemy positions so that the artillery can fire at that exact position. The enemy forces get completely overwhelmed by the Empire's might, and so, the enemies decide to attack the Empire observer mage. That is Tanya, to regain their footing in the war. Meanwhile, Tanya relishes the fact that her first mission turned out to be so easy that it is incredibly one-sided. She continues her mission but notices that the radio transmission from the control center is being interfered with. The enemy briefly cuts down communication and launches an attack on Tanya, hoping to isolate and take her out. Tanya skillfully evades and, when she regains communication, she relays the sudden attack. The higher-ups order Tanya to delay the enemy till support arrives in 600 seconds. Hearing this, Tanya gets frustrated and asks permission to retreat from the battleground, only to be denied and instructed to fight as God is on their side. Refusing to accept God's existence and being annoyed, Tanya turns back and resolves to fight the enemy mages who attacked her. She charges toward the enemy with a burst of maniac laughter, celebrating her chance to finally seize glory and distinguish herself by killing the enemies. The aerial duel begins, and with one masterful evasive maneuver after another, Tanya slowly chips away at the enemy numbers. The enemy commander watches in horror as she grabs onto one of the men and seemingly self-destructs with a magic explosion, taking out all mages in proximity. Turns out Tanya did this on purpose to leave the fight while making it seem that she fought hard. The reinforcements arrive, and the enemy retreats. Later, in the medical room, the badly injured Tanya is surrounded by soldiers, and one of them announces that due to Tanya's incredible valor and skill, she is awarded the Silver Wing Assault Badge. Applause echoes in the room, and Tanya realizes she's being treated as an ace and hopes she won't be sent back to the front lines, as that was her goal all along. As she really dislikes killing, but she had to be in the army so that she can survive in this new world and have her revenge on being X. After recovering from her injuries, Tanya is given her new deployment orders. Being the ace of the Empire, the exceptional soldier who earned the Silver Wings badge at just the age of 9. Therefore, the higher-ups don't want to deploy her on the front lines so that they can keep up their formidable appearances towards the enemies. Tanya is overjoyed to hear this, as she is being assigned to the tactical instructor squad back home. Trying to hide her joy in getting a safe and comfortable spot, she pretends to be not satisfied but happily agrees. She also finds out that she'll be testing a new prototype computation jewel. Testing the thing out in the air, her joy of a comfortable deployment fades away as she struggles to control the incredibly powerful prototype. Remembering back the briefing she got from the scientists about the jewel, Illinium Type 95, she was told that this revolutionary jewel uses tremendous amounts of magical power. According to the scientist, Tanya should have no problem with it since she has an extraordinary amount of energy. No problem, my ass, wonders Tanya as she swirls through the air like a drunk isekai truck driver. The device is clearly unstable, and Tanya insists on aborting the testing. The chief engineer, however, firmly disagrees and blames Tanya for simply not concentrating harder. He is convinced that his invention is revolutionary and refuses to back down. Tanya gets furious and she tells him that his delusional is worse than a mid-girl calling herself a baddie and cuts the magic supply, only to end up caught in an explosion anyway. Fuming, she lands and drops her equipment, angrily walking back to her room with the chief engineer behind her arguing like an annoying wife. Tanya calls his invention defective junk and tells him that though she agrees that it is theoretically revolutionary, but it still has a lot of flaws, and he needs to improve them, slamming the door behind her after saying that he'd understand if he had lived longer. The chief engineer just stands there wondering why a 9-year-old imp just told him that, knowing full well that his dog is older than her. Tanya writes a letter requesting a transfer as she would much rather be on the front lines than be a lab rat. The officials end up approving her request and canceling the project, cutting all funding to it and deeming the jewel too unstable and unreliable for use. That night, Being X animates as a toy soldier and confronts the overjoyed Tanya. He accuses her of not having changed a bit and still having no faith. He questions why Tanya, despite everything, won't call him for help. His questions are only met with sassy rejections by Tanya, who browses the atheism subreddit quite often, and is practically a neckbeard keyboard warrior. Being X decides that maybe she needs a blessing to change her mind, and once she gets a miracle, she'll gain faith. Tanya breaks the toy, labeling miracles to be nothing more than glorious misunderstandings. The next morning, she wakes up and figures that it was all a dream. However, she finds a piece of paper with Deus Lo Volt, meaning God wills it, written on the paper. Later, Tanya gets ready for one more last experiment, and while putting on her equipment, bickers with the chief engineer, telling him that his passion would be better suited elsewhere. With that, Tanya blasts off, gaining altitude at high speeds, but the jewel starts to destabilize again. Knowing this, the chief engineer assures Tanya that their success is guaranteed, as last night he had a divine inspiration, where a god talked to him and gave him an idea. In his mad passion, he is ready to have faith and pray to God or die as a martyr in the process. Tanya realizes that Being X is behind it all, but it's too late. The jewel rapidly destabilizes and the safety mechanisms to turn it off did not work at all. And on the verge of a deadly explosion, Being X freezes time again and reveals to Tanya that he has blessed the jewel by stabilizing it and performed a miracle. But there is a catch. Tanya must praise God every time she wishes to use it, hoping it'll eventually fill her heart with faith. Time starts, and while plummeting to the ground, Tanya unknowingly praises God and prays to him. The jewel stabilizes, and she begins gaining altitude, shocking all the other scientists. Tanya is impressed by the power but considers the jewel as a curse because she truly dislikes praying to God, while the chief engineer walks away satisfied, saying Deus lo volt and proclaiming his faith. Back in the present, hellfire rains down upon the battlefield in the form of enemy cannon fire. The soldiers lay anxious in the trenches, waiting for orders, facing the threat of imminent death. The cannon's fierce assault relents, and they get their orders and march forward, only to be met by enemy fire. They valiantly charge forward, but to no avail. It is an absolute massacre at the hands of the enemy. The soldiers, screaming in agony, are saved by the reinforcements, a squadron of mages who, with their magic, manage to rescue them back to the trenches. The situation is bleak, but the orders are absolute. They have to keep the enemy at bay, even at the cost of their lives. Among the mages who are providing air support, Tanya aims at the enemy ranks and with one charged explosion spell, lays waste to the enemies of the fatherland. Amid the downpour of shells and bullets, she emerges victorious, and she gives motivation and hope to those under her command. In a world steeped in warfare, one nation, known as the Empire, was considered the big daddy of all other nations due to its exceptional military and industrial prowess. Coupled with the countless brilliant minds and mages, the Empire became synonymous with victory. However, it was surrounded by potential enemies on its borders. To overcome this, the military came up with Plan 315, a strategy where border forces delayed enemy advances and bought time for the highly mobile main force to come to defeat the enemy on every side of the border. At least that was the plan. At the Imperial Strategic Headquarters, the generals discussed the dire circumstances like a bunch of beta nerds. Plan 315 is no longer viable as they've already lost half the troops they deployed trying to buy time. Not only that, the main force faces too many delays. Too often, they lament knowing that a major offensive against the Entente Alliance was a mistake. They brainstorm strategies, and one of them mentions that Rhine has become a living hell because of the conflict. Meanwhile, at Rhine, the soldiers march, filled with dread, and Tanya observes the battlefield, flying high with her magic. She spots enemy soldiers and orders the other mages in the air to open fire. Noticing the artillery firing upon them, two mages, Herald and Cursed, under Tanya's command rush to destroy it. Tanya sternly orders them to retreat as their mission is to only buy time, but the soldiers disregard her orders and continue. Though they succeed in destroying the artillery, they earn a little spanking from Tanya and her wrath. Later that night, Tanya calls them and announces that they're being sent back home, calling it a light punishment. She makes it clear that the army does not need soldiers who can't follow orders. Herald and Cursed refuse to accept the dismissal, infuriating Tanya. She grabs hold of her sword and calls out their disobedience, but luckily Victoria steps in, calming Tanya down. Tanya withdraws, saying she'll reconsider her decision but won't let this go unpunished. And the next morning, Victoria is glad when she finds out that those two have been sent to the rear camp on standby, knowing that they'll be safe there instead of facing Tanya's wrath. Later, amidst another heated battle, Tanya tells Victoria to stop slacking off, but suddenly her tone shifts, asking her to call an emergency meeting. In the meeting, they find out that the 403 Company artillery observers have come under attack from enemy mages, and because of this they can't use artillery to fight the enemy, as they cannot detect them without their observers. Tanya proposes a delaying to rescue the observers because rescue may be difficult as the observer hunters are difficult to deal with. Moreover, she adds that Victoria is at her limit and cannot fight further. Hearing this, Victoria, with her wounded pride, urges the company commander to let her go. Despite Tanya trying to dissuade them, Victoria gets the go-ahead to participate in the rescue mission by the commander. Elsewhere, the 403 Company observers are pinned down by enemy mages who are gunning them down without mercy. The observers try to hide in the trenches, but the enemy commander, arrogant and sure of his victory, orders his men to fire a wide-area explosive spells with maximum output to completely wipe out the trenches and the observers. Tanya and her rescue party arrive late, and all observers are dead. But instead of turning back, Tanya decides to eliminate the enemy. Victoria is baffled, wondering how their single unit could take out an entire enemy company. but Tanya assures her that it will be easy since the enemy has used up most of their firepower to eliminate the observers. But Tanya knows that she might lose a few of her troops and that might hurt her promotion, so she orders her platoon to rendezvous with Lieutenant Schwarzkopf to provide support to her, and she engages against 3 enemies' platoon alone by herself. With a demonic gleam in her eyes, she fights them and completely overwhelms the enemy, killing them off one after another in aerial combat. She demands the enemies that they stand down, leaving Victoria in awe of her patriotism. When negotiations fail, she warns her allies to prepare for impact and begins casting a massive spell. With her incantation complete, she fires off the charged bullet, eviscerating the enemy in a huge explosion. The fight ends and the rescue party is left in shock and surprise of Tanya's powers and reliability. In the enemy capital, a lieutenant reveals that a single mage wiped out their 106th company. She was first sighted 2 months ago, and in that short span of time, Tanya has earned the nickname as the Devil of the Rhine among enemy troops. Elsewhere, at the Empire's Strategy and Operations Department, everyone celebrates the fact that the reinforcements made it just in time. Just then, Lieutenant Colonel Rarujan's face turns pale when he reads the report that Tanya de Gurachav was sent to Rhine Theater. Horrified, he expresses concern and calls her a monster in the form of a girl. Meanwhile, Victoria learns that Kirst and Harold are dead after an enemy bombed the pillbox. So, she goes to inform Tanya but finds out that she had already anticipated that and sent them there on purpose. The moment she hears that, a chill runs up her spine, as she watches in horror as Tanya smiles menacingly. The next year, 1924, Tanya is again on the front lines, cursing the need to pray to God just to use the jewel and survive the hellish battle. Back at the headquarters, going over Tanya's accomplishments, everyone agrees that she is the ideal soldier. But Lieutenant Colonel Rarujan still is cautious due to her manic personality, and the latent danger that lies, as Tanya is the only one who can use the advanced jewel. Seeing this, they decide to send her to officer training so she'll have to attend a military academy in the capital. Meanwhile, Victoria, complaining to herself about the harsh conditions, immediately sits up when Tanya comes to her. Taking a seat, Tanya informs her that she recommended Victoria for officer training. Victoria is happy to be sent back to the cozy capital but is worried that the vindictive Smurf Tanya will get her bombed and killed like she did earlier to Kirst and Harold. Tanya stands up telling her bitch please you're not even worth killing and leaves. While Tanya is waiting for her transport, Lieutenant Schwarzkopf comes to see her off. Turns out that Tanya only recommended Victoria for a promotion to keep up the front of a superior officer who cares for her troops. Meanwhile, headquarters reviews the war situation and realizes that their main force lacks adaptability and mobility. They conclude the need for a rapid response unit. Tanya, on the other hand, celebrates thinking about the easy life that awaits her in the capital, not knowing that being X has another plans for her. The clock strikes 6 in the morning, and Tanya wakes up to a serene morning. She gets dressed in her uniform, puts on her silver wings badge, and makes her way to the military university. It has been 6 months since Tanya got enrolled in the university, and everything has been going perfectly. Her goal of a cozy life is well within her reach. She enjoys her studies and has an easy time fitting in despite being the youngest one there. Her accomplishments and experience on the front lines have earned her the respect of many other soldiers. Class begins, and the teacher asks a question. The first student gives an emotionally charged answer that angers the teacher, who asks him to sit down. Tanya is asked the same question, and her nuanced, rational answer leaves the teacher impressed. With that, the class ends, and while the other students make their way out, Tanya stays seated on her bench, takes her rifle out, and begins cleaning it. Captain Uger approaches Tanya and inquires why she is always working on her rifle. Tanya immediately responds that as a soldier who has seen battle, she feels uneasy without her rifle. Hearing this, Captain Uger leaves, not wanting to disturb her and acknowledging that Tanya is the ideal soldier. Of course, that answer was just to keep appearances. In reality, Tanya keeps her rifle ready in case she gets a chance to shoot being X. Later, in the library, Tanya has trouble reaching a book on the shelf due to her height. While she struggles, a man comes around, takes the book, reads the title, and compliments Tanya on her dedication to her studies. Seeing the man's collar, Tanya realizes that the man is a high-ranking general, and immediately salutes him. The man introduces himself as Zetor, the Vice Director of Strategy and Operations. Knowing the reputations that Tanya holds, Zetor decides to ask Tanya to come with him, and Tanya readily agrees, seeing this as an opportunity to further secure a cozy future. In Zetor's office, he asks Tanya about her opinions on the ongoing war and the future that awaits them. Tanya, cunning as always, takes the diplomatic approach and says that the question is too broad. Therefore, Zetor rephrases his question to ask specifically what the next developments in the war will be. Tanya, once again, tries to avoid a direct answer, but when Zetor insists, she tells him that the ongoing war would develop into a much larger war that is the World War. She justifies her reasoning by saying that the Empire is a newly established global power with